Okay, so another short video on spoken language and social groups, this time from Sarah Thorne, Unit 8, Language Variation, Regional and Social. Now it's important to remember, as we've seen, that people speak differently according to a number of features. We've touched on ethnicity, we've touched on class, we've touched on areas of the country. And here in Unit 8, Sarah Thorne says, well look, language can vary. It can vary regionally, and it can vary socially. And there are a number of features to consider: age, gender, occupation, and educational background. It's self-evident that people of different ages speak in different ways. Your grandparents will speak, they'll have a different structure, a different set of vocabulary, perhaps even some unique verbs or nouns that pertain only to their class or their generation. Younger people will also have a different set of lexical rules, different set of grammatical rules. That'll be part of their identity of belonging to a younger social group. Gender. We've touched on in the Stripey Cambridge book how men and women use language differently. Women tend to go for consensus politics, tend to suggest things rather than come up with direct commands. Men tend to be much more factual, much more commanding, and much more vying for primacy amongst the rest of the people in their peer group. So the men are always looking to be the alpha male, whereas the women are looking to create a consensus of opinion amongst each other through hedges, through suggestions, and so on. Occupation: lawyers, solicitors, barristers, doctors, they will too have a field of lexis that pertains uniquely to their trade. The same with builders and the same with carpenters, and that will seep into their daily use of language. However, your educational background is quite probably one of the most significant factors in shaping how you use language. It is without doubt, as we've seen according to class theories, essential that if you wish to communicate effectively, you have a good education. Good educations tend to go with people from upper middle class and higher class backgrounds. Weaker educations go with people from working class backgrounds. And as we know, this has an impact on how you speak, the size of your lexis, your elaborated code, which tends to belong to those who have a better education, and a restricted code, which will be characterized by a small vocabulary, shorter sentence lengths, and so on, which tends to belong to people with a lower class education. Your accent, received pronunciation, is quite critical. It's self-evident that RP was once the language of the BBC and radio, and that's how people aspired to speak. And when people aspired to speak in an RP manner, there was, of course, convergence and divergence. In convergence, if one were to meet someone who spoke with an RP accent, one sought to emulate their accent and speak rather like this. And of course, divergence, if one met another person with an RP accent, one might revert to one's regional accent to show difference, like, because you weren't sure of what it was like to speak with a received pronunciation accent. See? So we've got convergence and divergence. I call it the Betty principle. My grandmother on my mum's side was called Betty. In work, where she was manager SV Town, she was called Mrs. Shirley. If anybody rang at home, Betty would go from being my granny and being chitter-chattering, talking in a perfectly normal social way, and she'd pick up the phone and say, "Hello, Mrs. Shirley speaking." So there was this switch from a particular type of accent and lexis at home, socially part of the family, to a far more professional RP type accent and lexis when she was on the phone doing business with her colleagues or the people who worked for her. So people sought to emulate the RP speaker, and in this, Thorne refers to overcompensation and hypercorrection. So if you wanted to converge with the RP speaker, you would begin speaking rather like them. So one would say, "The rain in Spain falls mainly on the plain," rather than "the water in Majorca don't taste like what it oughta." So in trying to emulate that RP accent, people would overcompensate and hypercorrect. And when the correction goes too far, and you get this hypercorrection, a certain sound becomes overpronounced. So perhaps in wanting to restore the H to one speaking, hypercorrection there would see someone overemphasize, say, "Hello, how are you? It's very nice to meet you. have a very nice cup of tea. So they'd overemphasize the H to put it back into their accent to try to emulate the RP speaker. So that's all from Unit 8, Spoken Language and Social Groups. Remember, language variation can be regional and social, depends on a number of factors, can impact upon your accent, and many people wish to emulate, or did wish to emulate, the RP speaker, although that's probably changed, and now you see people trying to emulate gang members or regional speakers like Cockneys because they want to form an identity as part of that group. Hope this helps. See you soon.